The only color anywhere on the ship is the blue glow of the reactor cores. They power 12 massive drive assemblies that propel the ship at unmatched speed. I gaze around in amazement as I board the ship, called Atreus, and the cargo bay doors seal closed behind me. It's the year 3045 and my name is Tim Martin. I'm part of a research team about to head to the planet Shohola Prime. A group of scientists who have been studying the planet for years have found signs of some type of plant life. NASA has sent various space shuttles up there numerous times, but were unable to get any tangible photographs or samples because the shuttles either kept crashing or disappearing, until now. The last shuttle returned a little over a month ago with images of a massive flower the size of a mountain range. Ever since the news spread to the public, it has caused mass hysteria. People who have been dubbed the believers by the media have been seen worshipping and praising photos of the flower. They think it's some sort of god or something. Can you believe they're sending up another ship? This is utterly ridiculous, Shelley Osborne complains. She's the ship's commander for the entirety of this mission. I've never worked with her before, but I've heard that she's very strict and likes to do everything by the book. Which I'm perfectly okay with that. It's less likely that anything will go wrong. She has no family, her life is her job, and she's been on dozens of missions just like this before, so she knows exactly what she's doing. Jeremy Fraser, our pilot, replies, "Yeah, tell me about it. I heard it's called Adonis." Jeremy and I worked together on a previous mission. He's a cool guy, a bit of a goofball, which keeps everyone on their toes. I have to agree with the two of them. I thought it was a joke when I heard about it. What they're talking about is the fact that NASA decided to send up a second ship along with us. My ship Atreus is full of over 100 crew members and researchers, while the other ship Adonis is carrying another 100 crew members and believers. Since they donated a nice chunk of change to NASA to help with this research mission, someone at headquarters thought it'd be a good idea to allow them to accompany us. I think it's absolutely absurd. I mean, they're not trained for this type of thing, but I guess money is more important than safety to some people. The reason there are so many people on each ship is because other countries like China, Russia, and Germany sent their own teams of researchers and scientists over to help us out on the mission. Each are trying to get their own information for their separate countries, but due to the Universe Explorer 1 treaty founded in 3038, they have to share their findings among the rest. The mission will take 200 days to get there and then another 200 to get back, so a little over a year. Amongst the over 100 other people on board with me are Terry Benson, Paul Cummings, Bonnie Riley, Marianne Bergeron, and Derek Henderson. Myself, Bonnie, Paul, and Marianne are all researchers, and Terry and Derek are part of the ship's crew. On the other ship are the Believers, the ship's commander Tyler Johansson, and the pilot Antonio Ortiz. Antonio went to college with Paul and I, but ended up transferring to another school in his sophomore year. Although he was in another state, we kept in touch, and after the three of us graduated, we all moved to Washington, D.C. and got jobs working for NASA. I don't know all of the other crew and researchers. We all head to our seats and prepare to get strapped in for launch. It's a very tedious process, but it gives me time to think about the job ahead. I rehearse mentally my initial duties in orbit and pray for my own safety as well as the safety of my crew, and for our mission to end successfully. On each of my launches, I definitely experience butterflies in the final minutes to countdown. When the main engines ignite 10 seconds before liftoff, the entire ship starts to rattle and shudder like a skyscraper in an earthquake. Neon lights flicker all around me, and a deep rumble shakes the cabin as the main engines come up to full thrust. The countdown begins. I close my eyes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The solid rocket boosters ignite, giving me a massive kick in the back as they blast our ship off of the pad. The pounding exhaust from the twin boosters shakes me continually as we accelerate, ripping through the lower atmosphere. As we enter the final minute of the ride to orbit, it feels as though two grown men are sitting on my chest. At this point, I'm just praying that the ship will hold together. Then the pressure on my body vanishes, and I'm afloat under my straps in free fall. I lived to make it to orbit and to start the mission at last. It was an exhilarating feeling of mental and physical relief at the passing of that risky phase of liftoff and ascent to orbit. The next 200 days drag on. My work keeps me busy, and in my free time I read a lot, work out, or hang out with the other crew members and play games or watch TV. Occasionally we had some situations. I heard from the other flight crew on the Adonis that the believers have been giving them problems and not following protocol. I'm glad they're not on my ship. I can't explain how relieved I am when the planet Shohola Prime finally comes into focus on the radar. It's a beautiful bright azure color and it has a faint glow to it. We should reach it in another 2 days. The closer we get, we begin to see the flower. It's a very vibrant pinkish purple color, and it's the biggest one that I've ever seen. They weren't exaggerating when they said that it was the size of a mountain range. It's gotta cover at least a quarter of the planet. Imagine the Alps, but instead of rocky mountains, it's a giant flower blooming with roots and petals the size of a large mall. We get suited up and prepare to land. All of the medical crew, flight crew, and mechanic crew will be staying behind on the ship while the scientists and researchers go out to collect data and samples. We'll be taking Terry and 2 other doctors along with us. Terry and I also already know each other from working together on previous missions. His wife passed away 5 years ago from some type of cancer. They'd been married for 30-something years. Since then, he remarried, some woman named Charlotte. I met her once at an event that we both attended. She seemed like a nice woman. She also looked a lot younger than Terry. As curious as I was, I never asked their age difference. Everyone gets strapped in and then the rockets fire to bring us down to 0 velocity. The ship free falls the rest of the way, cocooned in airbags to cushion the blow. It hits the ground and bounces, about 30 times altogether. When we finally manage to regain our composure and make it out of the ship, the surface of the planet is full of obstacles. Massive impact craters, cliffs, cracks, and jagged boulders hinder us in getting to our destination. The unpredictable winds are another complication. But when we finally make it, it was well worth all of the trouble. This is amazing, I say to Paul. He agrees. Yeah, I think this may actually be the most gorgeous thing I've ever laid eyes on. What about your wife? I ask jokingly. You better not tell her what I said, he warns with a laugh. Paul and I are best friends. We met back when we were in college. I'm the godfather of his 2 sons, and I was the best man at his wedding. I myself am still a bachelor and prefer to keep it that way. I don't mind not having anyone to come home to. I enjoy the peace and quiet. It gives me more time to focus on my work, which I love. Hey, since Shelly and me both care about our work so much, maybe we'd be good together. I laugh at the thought. She's got to be at least 20 years older than me. Shelly suggests that we take a look around while we're waiting for the other ship to arrive and land. I'm excited to see what else we can find here. We break up into pairs. I'm with Paul, Bonnie is with Marianne, and Shelly is with Derek. Luckily, the direction that we head out in, the wind isn't too out of control. We search for what feels like an eternity, only to discover that the planet is void of any other life besides the flower. The only thing covering the entire planet is rocks, dirt, and ash. So we collect some samples for analysis, and just when Paul and I are heading back to the ship to meet back up with the others, the surface beneath us begins to shake. I hold on tightly to the samples that I just took so that they don't go floating away. Paul comes flying towards me, but I manage to dart out of the way before he can tackle me. He collides with the ground, then gets up a moment later and chuckles. I think the other ship has landed. I'd been so wrapped up in what we were doing that I'd forgotten all about them. Once the ground stopped shaking, we continue towards the ship. Bonnie and Marianne are already waiting there, but there's no sign of Shelly and Derek. Maybe they found something, I think to myself. Hey, did the 2 of you find anything out there? I question as we walk up behind them. No, just dirt and rocks, Marianne replies. Yeah, same here, Paul answers. It's so strange that there doesn't seem to be any other life on Shohola Prime. I wonder what's been keeping the flower alive all this time, says Bonnie. I met Bonnie and Marianne when I came to work for NASA a few years ago. They'd already worked at the company for a couple of months. Marianne and I hit it off and went out on a few dates, but turns out we didn't have much in common. Now she's engaged to some pretty boy who's an astronaut for NASA. I bet the 2 of them both spend the same amount of time getting ready in the morning. Bonnie's a nice girl. She's in her late 20s, which is younger than the rest of us. She's the real quiet type, keeps to herself most of the time. But she's great at her job. She's very efficient. I'm not sure if she has a boyfriend, husband, or kids. I never asked, and like I said, she keeps to herself, so she never mentioned them if they do exist. When the other team comes strolling out of their ship, it's the same time that Shelly and Derek show up. "Hey, did you guys find anything?" I ask them. "No, what about you?" Shelly asks. The four of us all reply no. "But there's gotta be something else here," Bonnie says again. "Maybe there is, and it's just located closer to the flower," Derek suggests. He's the head scientist that has been researching the plant that we are here to investigate. I just met him for the first time when we got the news that plant life was detected on Shohola Prime. "Well, we're about to find out," I tell them. The believers and their ship's commander, Tyler, all exit the Adonis and introductions are exchanged. I don't know much about Tyler, except for the fact that he lives in Utah and he's one of those polygamists. Last I heard, he had 3 wives. Before we head out, he warns the believers to stay with their squad leaders that he has assigned to them at all times and not to touch anything. Then we all start heading to where the flower is located, which is towards the back of the planet. When we begin to approach it, I see a large group of the believers kneeling before it with their heads bowed and hands clasped. They're praying. I lift my camera and begin to snap away. I think about how beautiful I originally thought that the flower was. While seeing it in person, it's downright mesmerizing. The roots look like a roller coaster, weaving up and down and in and out of the rocky hard ground beneath us. Now that I can see it up close, it looks more like an oversized lily pad, or better yet, one of those tea flowers that when you put it in the hot tea, it blooms. As soon as I get close enough, I reach out and touch a piece of one of its ginormous petals. They must be as thick as a tree and as wide as a 2-family house. They appear to be soft, but I won't know that for certain until we get back to the ship and I can touch them with my actual fingertips. But they do feel squishy. As thick as they are still translucent. On top of each petal is a thick layer of dust, and the flower seems to have an unearthly glow to it. The piece of petal breaks off and drifts away. I retrieve my camera and begin to take some photographs while Paul starts to take some samples. We have to cut samples from every part of the plant. I would have loved to be able to take one full petal, but it's just so big and heavy that even if we could, we'd need a flatbed trailer to get it back to the ship. I climb up the hill of petals and snap a photo of a tight bud, and then watch in awe as it begins to bloom right before my eyes. I snap some shots of the pollen floating all around us. It's thick and white and looks like snow. It even sticks to the ground and to the bottom of our boots. Once Paul has finished collecting some samples, him, Bonnie, and Derek head out with their climbing gear to go further into the flower. They need to get to the center of the plant to collect some of its reproductive cells. I take some photos of them walking across and then climbing the petals until they reach the center. Tyler appears in front of me. He's examining the flower as well. But he's supposed to be watching over a group of the believers, and I don't see any of them with him. "Where are your people?" I question. He replies, "Oh, they're around here somewhere." I spot them way down at the other end of the flower, all alone. "They're not supposed to be left unattended," I warn him. "Oh, come on. What are you gonna do? Report me? What's the big deal? They paid a lot of money to be here. Let them enjoy it," he tells me. I decide not to press the issue. I need to stay focused on my task. So I continue to snap more pictures. I take some of the crew and then a few more of the believers. When Derek, Bonnie, and Paul return, we gather our things and get back on our ships. As soon as we get through the door, we go through decontamination. One by one, we are sprayed down with a sodium hypochlorite spray so that we don't track pollen or any other threats into the ship that may have hitched a ride. Then we take our samples and secure them in the lab to research later. I get butterflies in my stomach just thinking about taking off again. It's the worst part of every mission for me. It takes a while for everyone to get strapped in, then the neon lights begin to flicker. I close my eyes and the countdown begins. 10, 9, 8, 7. I block everything out, trying not to think about what's about to happen. Then the cabin starts to shake, and then I feel the pressure on my chest. Then it disappears and I'm in free fall. The crew heads to the kitchen to get something to eat. As we sit down, the only thing I can think about is getting to the lab and beginning research on the samples that we took. But after we're finished eating, everyone just sits around for a while talking about the mission. As I'm looking out the window at the beautiful mountain flower, as I now call it, I think to myself that I'm so glad the mission went off without a hitch. No little gray big-eyed aliens, and no green-scaled reptilians shooting laser beams at us. None of that sci-fi stuff that you see in the movies. Just us landing on a planet and collecting some samples. All in all, not too different from any other mission. When we begin to study it, we notice that the sample of the flower we took still grows without being attached to the main plant, and that has us all intrigued. Then all of a sudden, 130 days into heading back to Earth, we receive a distress call from the Adonis. Tyler says that they are having issues with some of the believers. He says that they're going crazy, they've overrun the crew. Shelly, Marianne, Paul, and I, along with another 2 teams of 10, get suited up as Jeremy prepares the ship to dock with theirs. We bring along stun guns, handcuffs, sleep grenades, and mace to subdue the believers and gain back control. Bonnie stays behind but opens the airlock for us, then pushes the button to seal it after we've all passed through the door into the chamber. We stand there waiting for Tyler to open the other door for us from the cockpit. As soon as he does, all I see is mayhem. The lights are flickering and there's blood, tons of it, splattered everywhere. It looks like a slaughterhouse. It's dripping from the ceiling down upon us like rain. There are puddles the size of a small child every few feet apart covering the entire corridor. The walls are streaked with it. And as we approach the end of the corridor where it splits into 3 different entryways into the ship, there are bloody handprints covering the walls down the middle lane. Shelly instructs the teams to split up and go separate ways. As my team inches down the middle corridor toward the cockpit, which is where Tyler called us from, we come across something absolutely unbelievable. There are what appear to be vines growing from the walls of the ship. I stare at the members of my team in shock and disbelief. What in the hell is going on here? I whisper. The ship is unusually quiet for having over 100 people on board. As we turn the corner and enter the next corridor, not only do the vines continue into there, but we come across 5 of the believers kneeling, with their hands clasped together, praying to a piece of the flower. "Where did you get this?" Paul angrily screams at them. They don't seem to notice that we're here. I grab Paul by the arm as he attempts to approach them. "Hey buddy, I don't think that's a good idea," I warn him. The lights flicker and then blink back on, and that's what breaks the worshippers out of their daze. One of them rises to his feet and our eyes meet. With what appears to be pollen dripping from his nose, he asks if we'd like to join them in praising their god. I want to laugh. This is just so crazy. Just as Shelly is about to respond, the other believers stand up and turn around to face us. They look sick, very sick. Their skin has a grayish tint and it looks like old crinkled paper, and their eyes are sunken in with their bloodshot yellowish eyeballs swiveling around in the sockets aimlessly. One of them opens their jaw wide and displays a set of rotting yellow teeth. Then one of them begins to cough and pollen spews from their mouth in our direction. Another has some sort of green goo oozing from their nostrils down their face and into their mouth. The sight of them is sickening. I keep my eyes on them but ask Shelly, "What are we going to do?" "I think we're going to need to split up so that they don't go after all of us at once." I was afraid she would say that. "Alright, I'm going to throw a smoke grenade and everyone run at the same time, on the count of 3. 1, 2. She raises the grenade in the air, preparing to toss it at them. 3, Shelly screams. Paul and I go darting to the right while Shelly and Marianne go to the left. The corridor fills with moans, screams, and smoke as the believers chase after us. I don't know what in the hell they've become, but they're hungry, and they can smell the blood in the air. The vines slow them down, but they also make it nearly impossible for us to navigate through the corridors. As Paul and I come to the kitchen, the word "help" is written across the window on the door in blood. Paul bursts inside, but I glance behind me to make sure none of those things have followed us. The coast is clear. They must have gotten stuck in the vines. So I seal the door closed behind me, and that's when I see that we're basically trapped. There are massive vines tangled and running throughout the room. We can either turn around and try to find another way to the cockpit, or try to make our way through this and risk tearing our suits, I say to Paul. What do you suggest? He asks. I don't know, I reply. We make the decision to climb through the vines. Fear begins to set in now as I realize that I could very well die today. I know that it's always a possibility, dying up here while on a mission, but I never imagined that my death would be caused by something like this. We carefully but quickly make our way through the vines to the other side of the kitchen. I can hear the same moans that we heard when those things that the believers turned into started to chase us. There must be more of them over here, I tell Paul. When the moans begin to get louder, we each climb into one of the lower metal cabinets and wait for them to pass by. I slowly ease the door of the cabinet I'm hiding in open just a crack to get a glimpse of what's going on out there. Just then, 3 of the members of one of the other teams that came from our ship with us barge into the kitchen. I'm just about to jump out and warn them about the danger when I realize that they're being chased. A horde of the believers come hobbling in after them. But these ones look different from the others. They have similar features, but they're covered in what appears to be pollen and petals are sprouting from them. They also have vines going in and out and up and down their skin, just like the roots of the flower on Shohola Prime. Maybe they had direct contact with the plant instead of just breathing in the pollen like the other ones we saw praying. The 3 people get stuck while trying to escape through the vines to the other side of the kitchen. One of them, a man, is snatched by the horde, and I watch in terror as they stand there feasting upon him right before me. I turn away for a second, and when I look again, the man's right ear is missing and both of his lips have been bitten off. His screams are agonizing to listen to. I get a pain in my chest each time he lets out another. I can't see what has happened to the other 2 that were with him, but I can only imagine. I hope that Marianne and Shelley are okay. Suddenly I hear the sound of a cabinet door slamming, and then I see Paul running for his life. What in the hell is he doing? One of them lets out a moan, and then the others all join in. They've spotted him. He grabs a chair and throws it at them, then a metal tray, then a bowl. But nothing can stop them. So he grabs his can of mace and sprays it directly into their faces. My throat begins to tickle and my nose starts to run, and I'm way over here, so why is it having an effect on me but not them? If anything, it's only caused the green goo to ooze from their noses at a more rapid speed. They surround Paul, and I'm stunned that he doesn't scream in pain or fear. The only sound I hear are their moans, and the sound of bones cracking as I hear a loud pop. And I can only assume the worst. Since there's nothing that I can do, I wait for them to finish their meal and move on. Just when I think it's clear, Paul's body begins to move. But there's no way that he's alive, I think to myself. Then the bodies of the other 3 team members start to do the same. They rise from the floor as green goo slides from every hole on their face. I turn my head in disgust. Then their moans flood the kitchen. They sniff the air. They're looking for food. They follow behind the rest of the horde as they make their way out of the kitchen and down the corridor. I breathe a sigh of relief as I exit my hiding place and close the door quietly behind me. I stand in the exit to the kitchen, waiting for the rest of the horde to turn into the next corridor. Then I run straight across down that corridor that leads to the cockpit. There are flowers everywhere. They're blossoming from the floor, walls, and ceiling, and they're releasing pollen, tons of it, into the air. I feel like I'm walking through a blizzard. And the vines are still slowly growing. They're creeping into every single crack of the ship. They are moving at a turtle's pace, which is pretty fast for a plant. When I finally make it to the cockpit and open the door, Tyler is lying on the floor gasping for air. Pollen, snot, green goo, and saliva is flowing from his nose and mouth, and flower buds are sprouting from his skin. I stay back to make sure that he doesn't touch me. Tyler, what happened? Where did all of this start? I shout at him. He manages to tell me, I'm sorry. This is all my fault. I should have been watching them. That's all he gets the chance to say before he stops breathing. Just as I'm about to leave to go look for Shelly and Marianne, I remember that the commanders are supposed to do a daily breakdown, so I check the video log to see if maybe that will tell me what went wrong. I watch as Tyler's face appears on the ship's screen. The date is yesterday. I thought that this was just something little that I could take care of myself. He stops to shake his head, then continues. I thought it was just contraband that they had, so I sent some officers down to their quarters to take care of it. I figured that would scare them into handing it over. But they refused. They kept saying, it's nothing, just a part of our religion, something that we pray to. It's our God. So I give them the benefit of the doubt, and then people on board start to get sick. Not a normal sickness. No, this is something different. And then all hell breaks loose. Everyone is going crazy. They've started to kill each other. I know it has something to do with them. What do they call themselves? The Believers. He stops the tape there just as I hear the sound of moans in the background. I have to find Shelly. Maybe she'll know what to do. I rush out of there, not sure of where to look for her. On my way back down the corridor, I run into Antonio. Well, it's him, but it's not. Instead of legs, his body is a thick green stem. And sprouting from his torso and arms are the same pinkish-purple petals of the flower that was on Shohola Prime. What in the hell is that? What's wrong with Antonio? Marianne screams in terror as her and Shelly come down the other side of the corridor. Shelly immediately responds. It's the flower. It must be contaminated or something. Hurry, we have to get to the cockpit so that we can warn our crew. No, I just came from there. Tyler's dead. Everyone is dead, and the Believers are... I don't even know, I tell them. We know, we've seen them too, Shelly answers. Where is Paul? Marianne asks. I lower my head and shake it solemnly. Marianne is on the verge of having a panic attack. I race past Antonio to the other side with them, and he grabs at me begging, please, please help me. Pollen spews from his mouth as he speaks. They did this. They took samples and snuck them onto the ship. I know he must be talking about the Believers. Wait here. We're going to come back for you, Shelly tells him. But I can see in her eyes that it's not true. He begins to scream as we walk away. I'm not sure if the screams are from the pain or him just being scared. No, first we have to stop this before it spreads to our ship, Shelly says. So she leads us to the weapons room to get some incinerator grenades. The closer we get, the thicker the vines grow. The flower's massive roots are sticking out from under the door. Marianne is a nervous wreck when Shelly tells her that we'll have to crawl through them to find the grenades. She doesn't want to go, and she ends up ripping her suit the first step she takes through them. She begins to panic as the pollen floating through the air gravitates toward the hole. She screams in agony, "It burns!" She collapses into the sea of vines, and I can hear the sound of its thorns puncturing her suit again and again as she tries desperately to escape. Come on, we have to hurry. There's nothing we can do for her now, Shelly tells me. We continue to climb through the vines as carefully as we can. Then a few minutes later, Shelly shouts that she has found them. She reaches through the vines to a box and retrieves 2 small grenades. Then she makes her way back through the maze of vines to where I am and hands one of them to me. When we exit the weapon room, Shelly tells me to follow her. She leads me down a dark hallway to the quarters of the Believers. Then she sets the timer, pulls the pin from the grenade, and launches it inside of the door to the room. We run through the corridors of the ship at rapid speed. We only have 3 minutes to get out of here. We almost make it to the airlock chamber just as the grenade explodes. The entire ship shakes as flames billow throughout it. I can feel the intense heat above me, burning my back and probably my suit as I lay as flat as I can on the floor. When the burning sensation finally subsides, I stand up and glance behind me. It appears that the grenade did what it was supposed to do. It turned all of the vines to ash. But they did so much damage before we could stop them. Shelly reveals, I think the vines broke into the safety walls. When we threw the grenade, usually the walls are insulated so that the blast won't affect them, but since the vines broke through the safety walls, the grenade damaged the computer system. This is the first time that I've actually seen her look scared. What does that mean? I ask, afraid of the answer. It means we're screwed. We have to get off of this ship now before it's too late and we get trapped in here. I follow Shelly into the airlock, and we're surprised to see the door leading back onto our ship isn't sealed shut like it should be. We cautiously step inside and realize that the vines coming from the other ship are leading into ours. "What are we going to do now?" I ask Shelly. The same response doesn't fail to scare the shit out of me again. We're really screwed. "Well, what if we make it to the cockpit? Can you get us out of here?" "I don't know, maybe," she replies. I seal the door to the airlock closed behind us, and then we begin the ravenous journey to the cockpit. Pollen is floating everywhere, just like on the other ship, and the flower's roots are going every which way. They're completely taking over the Atreus. We reach the isolation room first. That's where we discover Bonnie. She's one of them, one of those plant people. "Where is everybody else?" Shelly questions. Bonnie tries to answer, but the only thing that comes out of her mouth is pollen. There are no sign yet of those zombie plant things on our ship, but I keep my eyes peeled. When we finally make it to the cockpit, Derek is there and he has a suit on, but there's no sign of Jeremy. "Where's Jeremy?" I ask. Derek answers, "He's dead. They're all either dead or have turned into one of those plants. It was that idiot Jeremy. I tried to warn him, but he wouldn't listen. We heard screams coming from the other side of the airlock, and he took a team and just barged out there so fast that he didn't follow protocol and the other hatch wasn't closed yet. When I saw what he was about to do, I ran to go get my suit on. No one else had any time. He opened the door and the pollen just came flooding in. I ran into the cockpit and I've been in here ever since. These fools were holding out their hands to catch the pollen like it was snow falling on a beautiful winter day, not knowing that they were sealing their own fates. And not too long after that, the vines slowly began making their way in. Now they've gotten to the ship's reactor core. And the reproductive cells that we took, they formed into another giant flower just like on Shohola Prime. It's already taking over the whole other side of the ship. This thing has got a mind of its own, don't you see? It did this on purpose. It summoned us to it. It sent out a burst of energy to get people to come to it because it ran out of things to drain its sustenance out of on Shohola. That's why we couldn't find any other signs of life there. And that's what it's going to do to Earth. It's a parasite. It can't live without a host to feed on. And that was Shohola, but now we're becoming the host. And if we take it back to Earth with us, it will take over and suck our planet dry just like it did to its own until there's only dust and debris left. I close my eyes and say a quick prayer now that I know for certain today is the day that I die. But then Derek continues. "Look, I have a plan. Thank God you guys are here because I don't know how to fly the ship. This should actually work out in our favor since the ships are attached. With the course plotted, we can aim it at the sun so that it won't have the chance to devour our planet. We can take an escape pod that launches straight from here, and now that you guys are here, one of you can fly it. It may take us a little longer to get home, but the escape pod already has enough food and water for at least 30 people for 50 days, and there are only 3 of us, so we can make it work if we ration until we make it home." "What about the pollen?" Shelly asks. "There's a small decontamination hatch right before you get into the pod, just in case something like this were to ever happen. It'll get rid of all of the pollen." "Derek, you're a genius. Let's do this," I reply. A smile crosses Derek's lips. I can tell he's full of hope. I already entered the sun's coordinates, but I couldn't go through with it because I was too scared. I wasn't ready to die. "So now someone just needs to hit enter," he says. Shelly answers, "I'll be glad to handle that. You two go to the escape pod and I'll be right behind you." Opening the hatch to get into the decontamination room, Derek hops in first and I follow behind him. Shelly just finishes punching something in and she's right behind me, but then to my surprise, she shuts the hatch and locks it. As I look up at her in confusion, I can see in her eyes that something's not quite right. And then I hear Derek yelling, "The other hatch won't open. She locked us in here." Trying to help him force the door open, I realize we really are stuck. Derek pounds on the hatch window and screams, "You sneaky! Oh, why would you do this?" I start pleading with her. "Don't you want to go home? This is a good plan. You don't have to be scared." She covers her face shield with her hands and begins to cry. "It's okay. The plan will work. Don't worry," I tell her, trying to comfort her, until I realize that she's actually laughing. She lowers her hands from her face, and then I notice it. A cut on the inside elbow of her suit. I tell Derek, She's infected. He asks, what? I answer, look at her right inside elbow. He looks through the window. Damn, he replies as she's still laughing at us. I don't know why, but the only thing I can manage to say is, Shelly, when did that happen? She replies, before I even met back up with you, when I was with Marianne. I knew I was already infected from the pollen, but I thought I could still complete what we had to do. I see a flower starting to sprout from the corner of her eye. She pulls her helmet off and says, I was ignorant to think that we could stop this, but now seeing the bliss of being one with it, why would I want to? It's not too late for you. I cut off the decontamination system, so the pollen is still in there with you. Just take off your suits and become one with us. Derek starts to panic, uttering every curse word in the book, and I begin to tear up. Knowing my options are either to stay in here, suffocate, and die because my suit only has an hour of air left, or to take my helmet off and become an energizer battery for this plant. Shelly looks at us through the window as I contemplate what to do, and before I know it, an hour has already passed by. I only have about 5 minutes left. Derek's suit has just started beeping, signaling that he's already out of air. He screams, I won't become one of you. I won't be used as an appetizer on your way to your main course meal. Gasping and coughing, he starts to choke. I just sit there, unable to do anything but watch as he suffocates. He bangs on his helmet, trying to reach his throat, which he can't because he's in his suit. He collapses as the life leaves his eyes. Shelly shouts, don't be a fool like him. It'd be better to be one with something than to die alone. I don't want to die alone. I'll do it. Just let me out. Wait, would you do it for me? I don't think I can bring myself to, I beg her. She happily opens the hatch and I climb out. I thank her, and just as she reaches for my helmet, I grab the taser clipped to her suit, step back, aim it at her, and press the release button. She collapses to the floor. I let go and rush over to the controls and turn the decontamination system back on and then hop back inside. Just as she's starting to get up, the system cuts back on and begins to spray me as I spin around. As she goes for the other hatch, I rush through and leap into the escape pod, then begin punching in the coordinates for Earth when I start to feel dizzy. The last thing I remember is Shelly still trying to open the lock. Then everything goes black. When I wake up, I'm still inside of the pod. Thankfully, I must have taken off my helmet before my air ran out and the pod's air kicked in. I stare at the screens before me. Earth is in my view. I'm probably about another 40 days out. Then I notice something else on the radar. I glance out the window of the pod and see that the Atreus and Adonis aren't too far behind me. By the time I touch down on Earth, I don't think I'll have enough time to warn them about the devastation that is about to occur. God help us all. Subscribe for new original stories weekly. See you next time on
Nina's Nightmares.
Really? You're supposed to click the like button, not me. Ugh.